Welcome, everybody, to another podcast by the Leadership DJs. You got Dan Chase and Jeff Mulitalo with you from Actualized Performance Solutions. Today, we've got a really interesting topic, and I want to introduce the phrase that we're going to use, and that is moments that matter. And to help introduce this and bring clarity to what moments that matter, what that means, and what those are, I want to turn to Jeff Mulitalo. Jeff, give us some context here. When we say that for leaders, they need to understand moments that matter, what does that mean?
Well, I think the phrase itself would suggest that there are certain experiences that we have or moments that make more of an impression in our lives than others. I think that's like point number one. But if you want to think about it in two dimensions, that's probably helpful for leaders to think about it today. The first would be like historical or significant moments that put people, organizations, or communities in just, it changes the world a little bit, if you know what I mean. So a way to think about it is those moments when you can say, where were you when this happened? Do you remember where you were when you learned about the 9/11 crashes in New York? So you get these big moments, and I think we can think of that as a point where leadership is needed in a poll. Then we have these other moments where if we're to think about it in individual aspects in our own lives, there's these significant moments that kind of mold and shape us, and it informs our willingness and our commitment and our motivation and how we see the world or the organization and our role within it. And you could think about the second one to say like, well, what experiences has made a really big difference in your career or life? So if you just think about on those two levels, it's clear that we have moments that matter always around us. But Dan, it might be a good idea to start with this macro, this big one, which is to say, what leadership lessons are there, or what should leaders be paying attention to, given that we're in a very disruptive state today?
You know, as you were talking about the significant events, by the way, these don't necessarily have to be global events, I think, but they are events that might impact organizations. Now, global events do impact organizations, but sometimes they have their own kind of world-shifting events. And what it seems to me, I think of Kurt Lewin, right? Some people say Levine, but Kurt Lewin, and this idea of when you're changing culture, there are these three states, right? There's that frozen state where culture is, and then this unfreezing that happens, right? And that's when the change, this moment of disruption, change is it's an opportune time to change because there is this disruption, and then you hope to refreeze. Leaders are feeling disruption and chaos and anxiety too. And so it takes a really effective leader to say, no, I have to think about others in this moment. I don't know. Does that make sense?
You know, I guess for our purposes, Dan, can you think of any examples of people in a moment like that would transform or help mold and shape in an environment where they are aware of this moment and they took advantage of it to the betterment of all?
Well, certainly you and I have interact in our consulting and our training and our conversations with leaders that I think are doing this on a small scale, but certainly a very conspicuous example for me that resonates is Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, right? One of these most famous speeches globally, you know, in history. Well, what a lot of people don't understand about the Gettysburg Address is we remember the words, but they don't understand that Lincoln was invited to speak at this dedication for the cemetery at Gettysburg, not as the primary speaker. He was told to come and dedicate the cemetery and just a few remarks or whatever the phrase was. And so the primary speaker, Edward Everett, the great orator of the day, spoke for 2 hours. What's really remarkable, of course, is that Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes, and it's his words that are immortalized, right? Government of the people, by the people, for the people. All these little phrases that we take from this, 272, 273 word address. But what I think what is more remarkable and more relevant for leaders today is that Lincoln said yes to the invitation in the first place. Here he is, of course, in the midst of this Civil War that for much of the war was not going well for the Union, but Lincoln recognized this as a moment that mattered. And he said, we have this victory at Gettysburg, and this is kind of called the high watermark of the Confederacy. Said, we've got this victory. This is my opportunity to change the meaning of the Union and to change the purpose and meaning of the war. And it's not just about preserving the Union anymore, but I'm going to make it so that people understand that this country needs a new birth of freedom, right? And to reinvigorate this country around the idea that all men are created equal, et cetera, et cetera. And so to me, the real genius of Lincoln's leadership here is to recognize that opportunity and then, for lack of a better term, hit a home run with that opportunity. But I think that's the kind of insight that leaders can utilize today and recognize this is a moment that matters for organizations and their team members. But you mentioned another type, maybe for lack of a better term, a more mundane type of moments that matter. Not that it's insignificant, but can you speak to that with more specificity? What do you mean by those moments that matter, that aren't these big cataclysmic events?
Yeah, maybe a good way to introduce this is to acknowledge some preliminary studies we've done on this subject, which is to ask people, if you were to describe 1 to 3 experiences that influenced you in a way that made you want to stay with the organization or increased your motivation or propelled you forward in purpose, right? What would those 3 things be? And we asked a decent number of people this question, and a really clear pattern emerged, which is in actually mattered as they answered those questions. They were all matters of instances where someone in a leadership position, or be it in an organizationally relevant hierarchical position, or someone who's got a great reputation, someone like that took the time to listen to them carefully, or to express confidence, or to acknowledge them and their inherent value as individuals. So in that respect, we can think of it as leaders actually create and instigate and catalyze moments that matter in ways that contribute to supporters' lives by finding those moments, which in some ways they don't present themselves. You've got to go find them, or you've at least got to be aware of them, right? But I think what it speaks to are moments where, we can say that we do look to leaders in those moments to affirm things that we'd like to believe about ourselves, or to affirm the value and potential of things that may be possible about us or about our work. And we probably fair to say maybe mundane, Dan, because it happens in the ordinary flow of life. You just have to find them and make them happen.
Well, I think these smaller moments, but that's a little misleading. But these moments that matter, that we are catalysts for, leaders are catalysts for. I think what was really revealing is that it may not see I think to the leaders, they seem like small things, but not to the recipients of the behaviors or to the supporters. And I think what's critical too is the word that keeps coming to my mind is force multiplier. And in this case, they see these moments are force multipliers as it relates to organizational commitment.
I think just being aware that there are differentiations between experiences and moments is really important, and your contextual awareness is important. And I really believe leaders can make progress on that with minimal investments of time and effort. It's a mindset. So if they were to take some time and to survey the circumstances in this big moment, this disruptive moment with this pandemic, they will probably find things that they should do that clarify purpose and rally people to that cause. And they'll also probably come to mind immediately things that they might do for some individuals that might bolster their hope and their confidence in the future. I would think you would agree with me. I have never seen a scenario where when leaders pay attention to individuals and are mindful of them and authentically demonstrate care and the inherent value of the individual, where that hasn't paid off. Moments that matter are about us constantly if we're ready to seize them.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been the Leadership DJs podcast, specifically about moments that matter and how leaders can really utilize those moments. For more conversations, more videos like this, white papers, blogs, discussions, please go to actualizesolutions.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Whatever else wouldn't have the same effect for Jim,
or Pam.
And I need to know what it is, what those, yeah, that's right. Jim